Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to a special meeting of the Victoria City Council for October 15th, 2020. If you wish to participate in the citizens communication segment of today's meeting, you can do so through a video conferencing option. We have set up this option to limit social gatherings and protect our citizens and city employees from COVID-19. Here's how access to the video conference operates during citizens communication. Visit www.zoom.com from your web browser, select join a meeting located at the top of your browser and input 444-573-113 for the meeting ID. Select join followed by open Zoom and then join with computer audio. Click on the icon labeled participants to access the option to raise hand at the bottom of the screen. Once you click raise hand, our moderator will announce you by your username you've selected, and that will be your cue to begin speaking to council. It's generally the practice of City Council not to respond to comments made during this time, but city staff will be available to follow up as necessary. At this time, I will ask our city secretary to call the roll.
Councilman De La Garza?
I am here.
Mayor Pro Tem Solis? I don't believe she's present. Councilman Blocknight?
Here.
Councilwoman Scott?
Here.
Councilman Young? I don't believe he's joined yet either. Councilman Lofgren?
Here.
And Mayor McCoy?
Here.
Thank you.
So we have a quorum of 5 members present, 2 absent. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now we'll open the meeting and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United
United States of America, and
To
to
the
the
republic for which it stands,
one
one nation,
States,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll move into communication. Mr. Garza, do you have any announcements?
No, sir.
All right, as a reminder, if you wish to participate in citizens communication segment of today's meeting, you can do so through the video conferencing option. This will be provided with audio only. There will not be an opportunity at this time to share your screen or any additional presentations. Please remember to silence any cell phones, televisions, or other background noise so that we can clearly hear your comments. Again, click on the icon labeled participants to access the option to raise hand at the bottom of the screen. Once you click raise hand, our moderator will announce you, and that will be your cue to begin speaking to council. During this portion of the meeting, the 5-minute comment period still applies as it does when citizens are here in person. Mr. Foote, do you have any citizens wishing to speak?
Mayor, there are no citizens wishing to speak.
Okay, thank you. We do have an executive session posted. Mr. Garza, do you see any need for this executive session?
Mayor, not at this time. I would recommend that we run through the presentation and the agenda item, and if after the presentation there are questions that the group feels need to be discussed in executive session, we can convene into executive session at that time.
Well, then please proceed with your presentation on the action item.
Thomas, do you need to read it?
Yes, after I unmute myself, thank you. Item D1 is approving a real estate sales contract for the sale of 10 acres on Ben Jordan Street for $350,000.
Okay. Next slide, please. Let me clear my screen so I can actually see the slide. Okay. So by now, everybody's familiar with the piece of property that the city owns off of Ben Jordan. This is a piece of property that was acquired for the site for a combined public safety headquarters building However, there's since the beginning, there's been 10 acres that the city has been wanting to sell. And so for a couple of years now, those 10 acres have been listed for sale. There really hasn't been much momentum on selling property until last year, when Realtex approached us wanting to purchase that property for a submittal for a tax credit project through the 9% process. Some of you may recall that project was called or is called Enchanted Gardens and was for a 96 unit affordable senior housing complex. The reasoning for the 96 unit count was because it was focused on seniors. It was going to be predominantly one-story buildings across the property. Some of you may also recall that at the time, we brought a resolution of support for council to approve. Also asked the County Commissioners Court and even the Regional Planning Commission to approve resolutions of support because we were very excited about the potential of having an affordable housing project through this 9% project that the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs has. You may also recall that at the time we were very honest and transparent with the reality that it's very difficult for our community to actually be awarded this tax credit program. We've made presentations to council explaining and giving some examples on how the QAP or the criteria in the program is skewed towards larger cities like Corpus Christi. And this year was no different. That project passed out literally by 1 point to Corpus Christi. And so it left that deal and that project not happening anymore. However, we're very fortunate to be dealing with a developer that is really interested in making something happen here in Victoria. And so what we've done since that time is assessed what our capabilities are for workforce development. You may recall Mike gave a presentation where we talked about reinvigorating the Housing Finance Corporation and how the Housing Finance Corporation has assisted similar projects in the past. And so we've done that. 3 of you serve on the Housing Finance Corporation, and so we've established those bylaws. We've reestablished that entity. And so in June, next slide, please. In June, the same company approached us, once again wanting to look at putting a project on this 10-acre site. However, this time it would not be through that traditional 9% tax credit process that we lost out to Corpus on. But we're interested in just generic conversations about how we make a project work. This new iteration of the Enchanted Gardens project would be different than the first iteration. This project would be a more multi-family complex. This is why you see the unit count go up to 168, because now this no longer would be a complex built only on 1 story, but it would be a multi-story complex. And you see there more or less what the breakdown would be in terms of 1 bedrooms versus 2 bedrooms and even 3 bedrooms to give you a sense of the diversity of the multifamily complex that it might be able to meet. Mike also gave a presentation about workforce housing and how oftentimes this includes people that are at the front lines, and we oftentimes don't associate these young professionals or professionals in general with necessitating workforce housing or a version of affordable housing. But the reality is that everybody does, and quite frankly, we even have employees that would benefit from this type of project. And so since June, we've been talking to the developer about what the options are. Next slide, please. In that same presentation that Mike gave, as well as Mark, who is the bond attorney for the Housing Finance Corporation, they described the 4% tax credit process. Just to quickly recap, the 9% tax credit process is a competitive process, which is that follows the QAP that is to benefit larger cities. And those are limited by project. And so our region, which includes Corpus, is only awarded 1 project every year. And so obviously there's a multitude of cities in our region that compete for that 1 project. And that 9% is obviously a higher tax credit. So it creates a lot of competition within its own right. The 4% tax credit program, which is also through TDHCA, is competitive but non-competitive. It's non-competitive in the sense that It does not compete with other projects in our region. Our region is not limited to one 4% tax credit project every year, like the 9% tax credit project is, and is a slightly different process to pursue for that program. And this is where the Housing Finance Corporation comes in. Obviously from a math standpoint, if a developer can only make housing affordable by pursuing the 9%, and now the option is 4%, there has to be other mechanisms to make up that difference that can keep the rents at an affordable level. And so this is where the Housing Finance Corporation can step in. This housing project submitted an official application with the Housing Finance Corporation. The Housing Finance Corporation has the ability to issue tax-exempt bonds to help with the cost of a project like this. And so in September, the Housing Finance Corporation adopted an inducement resolution for the issuance of up to $21 million in revenue bonds to facilitate this new version of the project. However, that request of $21 million still has to be approved by the state. It's a completely different board than the previous board. This is more of a bond associated board. At the end of the day, anything associated with tax credits begins at the federal level, whether with the IRS or with HUD. And so, believe it or not, the state actually gets allotted a numerical amount of millions of dollars that they can issue for projects like this. And so what the state agency does is that they kind of look at the big picture, and they look at all the projects across the state that are submitting for tax exempt bonds throughout the state, and they provide what is referred to as a reservation, in essence, a slot of tax exempt bonds that can be utilized for the project. And that's where the project is in now. The developer has a deadline to submit to that board, in essence, requesting that they sign off on what the Finance Corporation adopted and approved. That deadline's on Tuesday. We originally thought that deadline was going to be midnight, and we thought that we might be able to next week, but we found out that deadline was at 5. And so that's why there was a need for us to call a special meeting to do this. Very similar to last year when this developer entered into a contract to purchase this property with us, in the sense that they need to show that the property is under contract in their application to the state for consideration of the 4% and for consideration approval of the $21 million that the Housing Finance Corporation would issue tax exempt wise. So that's why we're here today, seeking approval of that. Next slide, please. Just to recap, just timeline. I know I'm running through it kind of fast, but as I mentioned, the deadline for the developer is October 20th. That state board would determine through a lottery system in November who gets those reservations, as they call them, for 21. And so we anticipate that the developer will find out if receive that reservation sometime in January, and anticipate that if they do receive that reservation of those tax exempt bonds, that they would begin construction of the project by fall of 21. And so this is very contingent. It's contingent on the state approving that reservation for the 21 million tax exempt bonds that the Housing Finance Corporation would assist with. Very similar to the first time. If the state does not approve the money that is necessary for this project, the buyer would not follow through with purchase of the property. Our understanding is that the developer is only interested in the property for the sake of this type of project. But obviously, we would all know more come November and come January on whether this project will happen. Ultimately, through the way the sales contract has been written, we retain the ability to not close, should something change. It's a very quick, high-level summary of where we are with this project. I know that the Housing Finance Corporation members might be a tad more familiar with this project, simply because it's already been discussed 2 or 3 times at the Housing Finance Corporation meetings. but I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have for Thomas, Mike, or I. And we're also willing and available to go into executive session should you choose to prefer to have that discussion in executive session.
Thomas, could you explain with the extension and stuff, what the length of this document would be covered?
Yes, sir. The offer is for a 180-day inspection period. And that inspection period could then be extended for an additional three additional extensions of 30 days each. So we're looking at a total of 9 months possible inspection period on this property. And then should we get past the inspection period, there's an additional 30 days to close. So the total length of this contract could be 10 months before closing.
And then if we
Or if
should falter, decide not to go through on our part, we just return the earnest money, correct?
If you'd like to get into much detail on this discussion, I would recommend that we go into executive session, but I can say that the contract, we specifically struck the provision that would have allowed for specific performance. And so if the city chooses not to go forward with this deal, then we can terminate this contract.
Okay. That's all I have. Anybody else have any questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I make the motion that we approve this contract.
No,
We have a motion and a second to approve the contract. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Should the record reflect that Councilman Young joined, and I believe he voted.
that is correct.
Okay, so it's six. So it's a six vote, one absent, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I think that actually concludes our business.
Yes, sir.
So we'll see everybody Tuesday night.
Sounds
All right.
good. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.